Well, today we're going to continue at looking at Paul's instructions that he gives us in Ephesians 3, chapter 4, 5, and 6 about how to live our Christian life effectively. And today we're going to talk about something that has really kind of become a big issue in the church. It's not necessarily so controversial, but people have very firm opinions on both sides of the fence. Sometimes I think they're more firm than they have a right to be. But what he's talking about is drunkenness. He says, do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Holy Spirit. Now, let's begin by defining what the word debauchery actually means. It means an excessive indulgence in sensual pleasures. And the problem with intoxication of any kind, whether it's alcohol or any other drug or substance you might use, is that it skews our point of view. We begin to lose our sense of self-control and better judgment. And many people have given themselves permission to do things that they greatly regretted later on simply because they became intoxicated. And I wouldn't limit it just to alcohol. I think there are a lot of ways in which people can become intoxicated today, even the idea of marijuana. In fact, I've had people saying, well, now that marijuana is legal, is it all right for me to smoke it? And I find this amazing because abortion is illegal, so therefore she'd have abortion. Whether the government says something is legal or not does not mean that it's legal in the eyes of God. And anything that causes an altered state of ability or perception is something that's not healthy. That's where I even wonder about people getting involved in things like digital or virtual realities, that the idea is that you are entering into an artificially created world of your own imagination. And we find that people are addicted to their phones. So the reality is we're talking about a bigger problem here of addiction, something that becomes a controlling influence over the decision-making process of your life. In Paul's time, that was most commonly the issue of wine. And the reason was because wine was such an integral part of their diet. In the ancient world, drinking water was often dangerous because they knew nothing about bacteria, but a lot of times water sources would become polluted, especially in large cities where they were drawing from wells, and plagues would spread. And so up until the very modern era, it was recommended to add alcohol to your water or to drink just wine or some kind of fermented drink as being safer, because they found that people who just drank water tended to get sick and not live as long. So, but there at the same time, you have that problem when this becomes a common part of the lifestyle, like it is in places like England, where you go in a pub, or in France and Germany and other places where alcohol is an integral part of the cultural setting of the nation. What you find is that alcoholism becomes a problem. And what we find is that that alcoholics tend to have bad judgment, make bad choices, whether it's from driving a vehicle when they're impaired, or engaging in something that otherwise they would not in a right mind have done. In fact, we find that the Bible goes into great length talking about the dangers of drunkenness. For example, in Proverbs 20 in verse 1, Solomon writes, wine is a mocker, and strong drink, which he refers to, we know today, was a fermented kind of alcohol like hard alcohol today. They actually had their own version of that. The strong drink creates a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. Again, in Proverbs 21:17, whoever loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. In other words, it'll lead you into excesses. In Proverbs 23:20, it says, be not among drunkards or among gluttons, eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags. The nature of the impairment is that not only does it momentarily or temporarily impair your abilities to think and act in a healthy and safe way, and a productive way, but it also begins to affect you in terms of your overall health. It takes its toll on your body and on your mind. And so here again, he says the drunkard is a person who literally poisoning himself or herself on an ongoing basis, and it's going to destroy them. Isaiah even spoke about that in his day. He says, "Woe to those who rise early in the morning that they may run after strong drink, who tarry late in the evening as wine inflames them." I guess we could say that he's kind of setting a boundary here. He says, if you're a person who starts drinking first thing in the morning, you're in serious trouble. You're an alcoholic, and you really need to admit that to yourself and then admit it to others who can begin to give you help or help you work your way through this and overcome its bondage, because really what's become is something that you're captive to. You may be someone who feel that you have permission to drink wine or something else. I can't dispute that, because the Bible doesn't outright forbid the use of alcohol, even though some would like to suggest that it does. But the whole thing is you have to really kind of measure, if you have permission to touch alcohol, can you not touch alcohol? Can you go without it for extended periods of time? I mean, weeks and months, even years. Can you live without it? Or is there this craving that I've got to have it, I've got to have it, and I've got to have it? Well, those are all very scary and negative signs, so that if the drinking of a substance or the using of any other kind of intoxicant becomes the thing that is the most prominent aspect of your behavior and your character, you have a problem, and you need to acknowledge that to God, to yourself, and seek professional and personal help from those who can get you through this. In fact, Paul writes in Galatians 5:21, he says, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. Those kind of things kind of come together. He says, I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. And I'm not saying that, if a person is struggling with alcoholism, that they're not saved. Many Christians have struggled with alcoholism, but it is the unwillingness to see that as a negative in your life. That the only way we can recover is by admitting that we have a problem. And there are many people who should never touch an alcohol or drink or any kind of substance ever again in their whole life. I had a pastor friend of mine tell me, he said that when he would go visit parishioners, and people would say, would you like a glass of wine? He said, I told my congregation, don't ever do that. Because if I take one drink, he says, the next thing I'll remember, I'll wake up 3 weeks later somewhere in Montana and have no idea how I got there. In other words, he was saying, I can't resist alcohol. It takes over and controls my life and destroys it. So I would say simply that that's what he's talking about, that people who basically become defined by that behavior. But the subtlety is how easy it is to slip into a place. Especially during this whole COVID era, we find that the problem of substance abuse has just skyrocketed because people sit at home, they're depressed, and they look to some kind of substance as a solace for their depression. That's the thing we got to be very careful of. If we're seeking to solace ourselves by some kind of intoxicant, again, we're in serious trouble. Again, in 1 Corinthians 6:10, Paul goes on to say that thieves, greedy, drunkards, revilers, swindlers will not inherit the kingdom of God. He repeats the same idea again. And then lastly, then he says in Romans 13:13, let us walk properly in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and sensuality, not in quarreling and jealousy. You see, again, these things kind of come together, the sexual immorality, the sensuality, the quarreling, the jealousy, the fighting. Those always seem to come as a result of the improper use of substances and the excessive use of alcoholic or intoxicating substances. And then in 1 Peter 4, he says, for the time is past suffices for doing what the Gentiles wanting to do. In other words, he says, we're looking in the rearview mirror of the things that the Gentiles want to do. They want to live in sensuality. In other words, they want to live for satisfying their sensual passions. In passion, in drunkenness and orgies and drinking parties and lawless idolatry. And he says, with respect to this, they are surprised when you do not join with them in the same flood of debauchery, and they malign you. So here it is. He says that if you sit back and say, I'm sorry, I don't drink, I don't engage, I don't want to be, I don't want to be part of that social setting. If you're around people who object to you having an iced tea or a club soda instead of having a gin and tonic, then you're in the wrong group and you need to move on, because they are looking to bring you into conformity to their lifestyle. And if that's not something that you can resist, then you need to no longer hang out with those sort of people and just say, it's not a good choice for me. Those are the kind of things that are very simple, very practical, but it's important for us to realize that we live in a culture which is increasingly given over to abuse of all sorts of intoxicants that will only bring negative, bad things into your life. So if you want to live a long life, you want to live a healthy life, one of the things you can do is stay away from the things that will work against that. Avoid the intoxicants as much as possible. So anyway, that's my point of view, my advice, and I think it's also consistent with what Scripture teaches. So God bless you. Go in His grace. We'll continue the conversation tomorrow.